welcome to our next episode of Called and Chosen, a series in which we're listening and learning a little bit more about the men that have been called to service in our parishes and to serve in the beautiful sanctuaries that we have erected to worship our Lord. Today we have with us Father Pat O'Brien. He's the pastor of St. Pius X Parish here in San Antonio. And Father Pat, I want to say thank you for joining us today for this episode. And as I usually do, just ask you to tell us your vocation story.
Well, it's a little different one. Mm-hmm. Everybody says, well, how often did your parents talk to you about being a priest? I was like, never. I've moved a lot. I mean, my dad, when he went into the Air Force, my mom and I moved to live with her mom for a while. And then we ended up at Ant Air Force Base in Colorado Springs. Then Metz, France. We moved on to Chambly Air Base. And then to England, to London, where I started first grade. So that gives you some ideas. In three different first grades, and before your smart aleck remark, all in 1 year. And moved. So when we went back to California for the second time, I thought I had a choice, but my parents sort of maneuvered it that I would take the short bus and go to the Catholic school near the Air Force Base up in Santa Maria. And as a junior, we had a retreat. I was there for my sophomore and junior year. And as a junior, we had a retreat. And I got this idea that I should maybe think about being a priest. Well, that doesn't make sense. I mean, I was an altar server. We were involved in church. We were always there, but never talked about. And it's like, there's no way. Because liberal arts and me, not necessarily good friends. Math, science, I do really well. So I was on my way to be a mechanical or maybe nuclear engineer. After I went into the Air Force as a chaplain candidate, the Navy was still calling me, trying to get me to enter into their nuclear program. And obviously I never did that. But so I left after 11th grade. My dad got transferred to Germany. So Germany gave me a lot of distractions and I didn't really think much about it. Applied to the I was supposed to go to the Air Force Academy, but I'm fairly blind. And so when I got in as a chaplain candidate, they asked me not to even to look at the planes. I'm about over 10 diopters of correction. And so, yeah, if it weren't for the chaplaincy, I never would have got in the Air Force. Mm-hmm. So and that's later. So I decided when the Air Force Academy turned me down, I was also accepted to Notre Dame. And so being me, I chose the University of Maryland in Munich because, well, I wanted to stay in Germany more. Mm-hmm. And so as I started the College Park program for engineering, well, sort of, it was basically all the prerequisite stuffs, I realized that engineering wasn't going to make me happy. And a friend of ours, Father Bob Ricardo, who ended up being a bishop, said to me, why don't you just go to the seminary and prove to yourself that isn't what God's calling you to. You can get your degree, you can figure out what you want to do. You can't finish in Munich anyway. So just, do that. So I wrote 2 letters to the Archdiocese of New York, which I got no response to, and I thought that was my sign. And my dad said, try one more time. Pick a place that you'd like to live. And I'd lived a few places in Colorado, so I moved. So I wrote 1 letter to the Archdiocese of Denver, and they accepted me. And so I show up, I knew nothing. Literally, I knew nothing. They asked me all these questions, I answered, and they said, where do you want to go to school? Menlo Park, California, or Conception, Missouri. And because I already lived twice in California, I picked Missouri because I'd never been there before. Wow. Middle of nowhere. Conception, Missouri has a population of 100. It is just incredibly small. The monastery is there, and that's about it. And that's probably the reason I survived. Because if I had been in Menlo Park outside of San Francisco, I would have continued having the fun I had my first year, and that may not have been good. So God, I can look back and see God started getting me off to Missouri, middle of nowhere. Mm-hmm. Really, it was like an hour and a half to Omaha. And that was like sort of a city in those days. So I went there, ended up getting my degree, get accepted to theology, and I thought, well, I guess I don't know what else I want to do. I should probably stay. And then as I got into parish ministry, because I hadn't been in Denver since I was a kid, from my first year in theology, I was assigned at St. Thomas More, which at that time was at the south end of the world for Denver. Mm-hmm. And started working in youth ministry and with the choir. And as time went on, I thought, I'm sort of good at this. It isn't what I ever thought for myself. And I would go to retreats at the Jesuit Retreat Center in Sedalia. And I just knew that although this isn't what I ever saw for myself, that this is really what God has sort of made me to be. So I ended up being ordained. It was a rocky start. 4 of us were ordained. 3 of us asked not to have a school. One of us, me, asked for a school. Guess what? 3 got a school. I didn't. So to compress that story, when I came to this diocese, Jim says to me, "So what do you want?" I said, "Jim, I don't answer that question." He said, "You got to give me something." I said, "Okay, I want a school." And I realized I probably wouldn't get a school. And so for the first time, either from the military or whatever else, I got the one thing I asked for. My next assignment in Denver, I said, "Look, I don't care. I don't want to be with a smoker." Guess what? So that was like the beginning of it. It was tough for me in Denver. When I took a leave of absence, there were a lot of other priests. It was a lot, and that's not an excuse. I wish I could have found a different way, but I look again how God worked in my life. As I left, I ended up meeting somebody. I got married. Church never acknowledged that, obviously. That didn't work. Ended up getting divorced. And I knew people would ask me, what's the best thing you've ever done? I mean, I've got to fly, be in the controls in F4. I've got to fly C-141. All these different things. I've had all these great experiences in the Air Force. I was the mayor pro tem of Cibolo. I was the head of the chamber for 3 years. I did all these different things, and people said, "So all this, what's your favorite thing?" And I said, "Well, being a priest. That's been what I feel best for." And they'd say, "Well, why not?" I said, "Well, my faith is still Catholic, just my religion was a little bit off." And as I grew up and I matured a little bit, I realized I needed to get back. And unfortunately, as I started the process, my dad died unexpectedly. And then as I was getting ready to start the process again, then my mom got sick, and then she died unexpectedly, both very young. My mom was 69, my dad was 71. And it was just, so I waited a little bit of time after that. Needless to say, my first diocese didn't want me back. So they told me they set up this process, and I had to find a benevolent bishop was the term they used. So I ended up running into, I knew Father Jose from some real estate that I had done for him. And I was going up to old PH in Selma. He says, "Hey, the bishop's coming. Why don't you just meet him?" So he introduces me to the bishop, and the bishop looks at me, gives me a hug, and says, "We'll make this work." And 5 years later, I was on February 2nd, I was incarnated into this diocese. So that's the Reader's Digest version.
That
But
works.
it's like I look and people say, "Well, I don't really have the skills." As the first time I read in the seminary, you have to get up and you do your part and you have to be prepared because all your friends are going to make fun of you. It's a very Christian, holy, affirming place.
Of course
seminary
it is.
We're probably not helping it right now.
Exactly.
So I got up there and it was one of those long readings like we just had from Kings or whatever else. And I got up there and I did the whole thing in like 30 seconds. And I sat down and I said to my friend, I said, "So how'd I do?" He said, "A little bit fast, and you should probably go back and do the responsorial psalm." So added a whole new meaning to the walk of shame as I go back up there, admitted that I'd goofed up, and did that. And I hated being in front of people. And I promised myself I would have to overcome that if I could do this. And so there was a lot of things that did not come naturally to me that I had to work for.
Yeah.
But as I keep telling people, if you find what God's calling to you to do, you'll never have to go to work again. Although there's a lot of work being a priest, but it doesn't feel like work. And there's a joy in it that comes. And I don't ever mind getting up in the morning and going to work. And people say, "Well, you have to take a day off." I said, "Okay, someday." I mean, I don't really feel, I don't mind working. Now, there's some things I don't like about the job. I don't think, who likes budgets? Oh, I guess accountants like budgets, but
I know what you mean by that.
who likes budgets? So, I mean, it is what God wants me to do. I just got a little lost for a while.
Yeah. Now, you use a term that maybe our viewers may not understand all that well. When you talk about you took a leave of absence, what exactly is that?
I was still a priest, but I had my faculties removed, so I couldn't do any priestly things except for emergencies. I'm still trying to figure out how I could, what an emergency would be where I had to say Mass. Because if a plane's going down, I don't think I'm going to think about saying Mass if a plane's
You
crashing.
might be able to do a general absolution real quick.
Yeah, so I don't know. I had to, take care of reconciliation. There was a list of things I got from Rome saying what I had to do, and I went and sold computers for a while, and then I got some friends of mine got me into real estate, and I did that for the rest of the time.
Yeah.
And I still stayed with the Air Force. I was a chaplain in the Air Force, and then they wanted me to stay, so I ended up being a liaison officer for the Air Force Academy in that time. And it's because of the Air Force that I ended up down here. So
Yeah.
that was good, because I really think, as people say, well, you can't agree with the bishop on everything. I said, I don't have to. I mean, administratively, we do things very differently. But he's the most loving, prayerful bishop I think I've ever encountered. I don't know how many bishops you know, but I've met a lot. And he is loving, he is caring, and he truly cares about the people and his priests. And I don't know that we can ask for much more than that.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it's a great ride, I think, is a good way to describe the priesthood to some degree. Because I think a lot of times people look at our life and they think, okay, well, he says Mass, he's got to pray, he's got to go to adoration.
Well,
If I get lucky, I get a chance to do those things.
Somebody said to me when I went to the seminary, I said, so when do we learn how to say Mass? It's like, well, that's not till graduate school. It's like, what? You got to go to graduate school? I don't want to go to graduate school. I mean, I didn't know anything.
Yeah. Yeah, and so it's something, I've always looked at it and said, the one thing I've learned, I've been ordained 8 years. You're coming on how many years now?
This July, 89, so 33.
33 years. Has there ever been a day you would say you were bored in your priesthood?
As a priest, never. And I think when I got distracted the first time, it's because I got caught up in the pettiness of life. I forgot about that mystery that happens on the altar, just on the other side of the camera, where heaven and earth come together and we get to change people's lives, and we get to do something in the person of Christ that nobody else can do.
Yeah.
And that gift is, I lost sight of that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I believed it as much as I believe it now.
Yeah.
And I think when priests have trouble, they haven't grasped that reality of what we're doing and that power that Eucharist has. And if our people got it, our churches would be full.
I agree. It's something I preach about a lot, is that reality of the presence of the Eucharist, because it's awe-inspiring that just from the few words that I say at the altar, this little piece of, I told people, it takes more faith to believe that's bread than it is to believe that that's Jesus.
Actually, don't tell anybody, but I put peanut butter on it once for the kids to help show them it could be bread.
And that was before consecration. We want to make sure
Yes. We took it out of the plastic wrapper. Right from the good sisters, yes.
And so I think it's part of what really forms us, is that becoming a part of our identity is what happens at that altar. What happens there influences everything for us to some degree.
It's not that we're doing it either. We're just there so Christ can work through us in a tangible way for people to be able to see. We are not doing that. We show up so that Christ can work through us. We are there in the person of Christ. And I think our heads get too big if we think, hey, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
But I have that gift to let Christ work. And then when we realize that, like the stained glass windows in all the ancient churches, that's why I love the seminary in Denver. They had the most amazing stained glass with the New and Old Testament in there. And it's like the old school. And it was so amazing that as we look at that stained glass as, in the middle of the night, the stained glass is nothing. But when the light's shining through it, it's beautiful. Our job is to get out of our own way and let Christ shine through us. Yeah. And then there's something beautiful to come. Because you and I are sort of klutzes. So if we can't let Christ shine through us, we might as well.
We'll make a mess of things if we do it on our own.
We do anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I'm sure, as much as we like to say we're busy in saying Mass, hear confessions, do anointings, what is something else about the priesthood maybe that you found? You didn't really think you might enjoy it, but now you're finding that, I'm pretty good at this, or I actually enjoy doing this.
I found, as a person that hated school to the day I graduated, and at my graduation with my MDiv, everybody's magna cum this, summa cum that, and all these other things. I am the very first person, just Master of Divinity, Pat O'Brien. And I said to Mike Joyce, the academic dean, I said, Mike, you forgot my honors. He's like, oh, dang, what? He said something else. But I said, magna cum laude. And he goes walking up to the podium and just starts laughing. Bishop was not as amused as I was, but I never liked that. But I love to teach. I love to help either to spark an idea in a child, a young person, or for a young person to help them get that spark of faith started kindled in them, where they realize it's not just something we teach, it's something we live, it's something real and present at every part of our life.
Yes, I think we can get caught up in this is what the church teaches. And it's very easy to do that, but helping people take that next step. To not only are we teaching about the faith, but it's livable, it's relatable. It is actually something that...
And sometimes it's just naming experience they have to show the holiness in it.
Exactly.
It's like, I was up for the Steubenville conference, so I'm hearing confessions. And finally, one of the bishops that was there with me says, what are you telling the kids? Uh-oh. I said, what do you mean? He says, you're saying something about impure thoughts. And I said, uh-oh. I said, Bishop, I don't believe in them. And he says, okay, continue. And I said, how can that desire that attracts a spouse to a spouse be at the kernel of what it is impure? I said, we need to realize that that's a call to respect the beauty of God before us. And you can give that to a kid, and all of a sudden what they've been tormenting themselves is, and yes, the church taught this. I realize it's our own fault. But luckily, Saint John Paul II, as a baby priest, fixed this for us. We just have to get the word out, that's a call to admire the majesty and the beauty of God. And then once we realize that person is showing us a different aspect of God's creation, then our idea isn't, what can I get from that person, which is that basic human desire, but then I have to go, how do I help get that person to heaven? And young people get that. And so the bishop looked at me and he says, so you're fully incarnated in your diocese? And I said, yes, Bishop. And so he looked at me and he says, we need more of that. And I said, well, you're a bishop, you can probably make that happen. And he said, I know, there's so much that we need to do. I think if we work with our young people to help them realize how present God really is to them, that they are holy, that their life is sacred, we start winning.
I think so. It was one of my saddest encounters as a priest. I was also at a Steubenville conference, probably the first one I went to, and I'm telling these young men and women, God loves you. He has a plan for you. He cares about you.
And I don't ever tell them that because they go, oh, you're just old.
And what the kids would look at is like I grew a second head.
Mm-hmm.
They could not comprehend this idea that God loves them.
Right.
Because they don't see it out there in the world sometimes.
The coolest priest ever, Father Mike Schmitz. Mm-hmm. Did you hear that too? Yeah. He has this great thing on reconciliation where he says, God wants reconciliation because he wants you back in community. He wants you back in relationship. God wants you close. He wants you back to himself. And if you're ever looking for something really good on reconciliation, go see the coolest priest ever, Father Mike Schmitz. And he has a great thing on it.
Oh, yeah.
He did it at a Sikh conference. He did that. So.
Yeah. He's done some really amazing stuff that I think helps us in our ministry because we don't have to recreate the wheel.
No, I'm telling people for Lent they should start Bible in a year. And what better thing to do the Bible in a year? What Catholic's ever done that?
That's true. How many of them come to our masses with a Bible?
We're supposed to bring Bibles to Mass.
Exactly. So we did take a short pause, but there is priorities that we have in our videos, and Gabby has taken some of that priority. They know exactly what we need, and they need our attention. But as I was saying, we don't always have to recreate the wheel. I remember that one priest that he was talking about how many of us bring a spiral and a notepad to Mass. And what he means by that is usually when we go to meetings, we go to conferences, we bring a spiral, we bring a notepad because we expect to get something out of it. There is something worth remembering. Is how many of us do that for Mass? Do we expect to get something to remember or reflect on afterwards and that stayed with me?
I find it intimidating. I have people, when they first started doing that, I'm like, what are you writing down? Are you turning into the bishop? What's going on here? And like some of my best ideas, I've almost put a notepad on the altar. Because some of my best ideas, being slightly ADHD, come to me in the middle of the Eucharistic prayer. And I can't lean over to the deacon or make a quick note. Hey, Google, can remember this, So I figured, it's a good idea. God's got to give it back to me because I can't stop now.
Yeah.
And people, that's the other thing. People say, I ask people to stand after communion and pray for those people receiving, which if you read carefully, there's no direction to kneel after you stand up for communion. So, and pray for people. I said, well, what about Scott? He distracted me. So could that be God telling you to pray for Scott? It's like we think we're here alone. We're here as a community, and we have to use those natural things. People confess they got distracted during Mass. I'm like, boy, you don't want to know what's going on inside of ADHD boy here.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot to it. Now, let's continue on a little bit. Now, being a priest doesn't mean you have no time and anything for yourself. What are some hobbies or things that you do to keep yourself occupied outside of the normal saying Mass or checking the budget?
That I can say publicly?
That won't get you in trouble with Archbishop.
So the trivia at the local bar should get left out. But no, sometimes I'll grab
if it's theology on tap kind of thing.
Well, we do theology on tap here, actually. But no, we used to go out with a group of us before COVID for trivia. You get that back. That's just a great way at the end of the day to blow off some steam and show us people how unsmart we are. But on a regular basis, I love to read. If you see I always wear my headphones, there's a book there. I don't listen to music anymore. I'm constantly listening to books and things like that. I have a motorcycle which I love to disappear on, and it's not a Harley. It's a better bike than that. So that I lucked into. I got a really nice BMW, Scott. It's really nice. So if you see a blue BMW in the hill country and it's going too fast, it's not me.
No, never. Still honk at it just to be sure.
And I love to travel. I mean, I use my vacation time even to do pilgrimages so I can share. I love going different places. I try to go to the Holy Land every 18 months. With COVID, that got messed up, just so people can get that sense. And I think, although that's not a hobby, there's such an alive sense of our faith when we're there. That's there. And I love to cook. You can check out my YouTube page. There's a bunch of my recipes.
What is your favorite thing to cook? If you had to pick one dish that this is it.
No such thing.
No such thing?
Depends on my mood.
Yeah, I mean, I've learned the same kind of thing. I mean, I have my fallback, and my fallback is chicken Alfredo. I found a very easy Alfredo recipe that Bishop Mike has made fun of me of ever since, because he's old school Italian. We don't always know. His mother had the recipe for marinara. It took 8 hours to make it. And so when I told him I found the recipe for Alfredo, he's like, "That's cute."
You did tell him, Bishop, we're pastors. We don't have time to spend that time cooking.
So I
didn't say that.
Because I was his associate at one point before he became bishop. And so I invited him over to my side of the rectory. We're going to cook dinner for him. I was like, I'm going to make this Alfredo. He says, "Oh, Alfredo." He said, "You use that with macaroni and cheese to make mac and cheese." I said, "Well, you're still going to enjoy it. Let's enjoy the meal anyway."
Yeah, see, and I do really well at steak. I do really well at prime rib, all meats. Yeah. I guess the beer bread that I've taken my mom's recipe and modified has become a favorite for a lot of people. I mean, I make etouffee, but it's like I can't ever admit how I do it because a friend of mine from New Orleans gave me the best cheat ever, and it's really good. So I just tell people it's Kevin Bowman's recipe, and I go from there. Yeah. Because it's too easy. I can't let people know how easy it is.
Yeah, it's the same with beer bread. I've learned my own way. At one point before COVID at my old parish, I would invite the teens to come cook with me. The original idea was that high school kids are, a few years they're going to be in college, they're going to be on their own, and I'd rather them not eat ramen noodles. You're going to make friends by knowing how to cook.
Right.
And so I was inviting them, and so I did breads and dinner rolls and stuff with them one time. And for the fun of it, I found so let's look at a beer bread recipe. It has been the biggest hit. It is all over the state. It's the easiest thing in the world to make.
1 12-ounce can of beer, 3 cups of self-rising flour, 3 tablespoons of sugar. Then I cover it with honey, which is not in my mom's recipe. Yeah. Then cook it, and then at 30 minutes at 375, I frequently do it on the grill. Then I put a stick of melted butter over the top, which makes this crispy, very healthy crust.
Oh, yeah. Well, to some degree, I've learned that the best things are usually not the healthiest.
Right. And I make a lot of pizza. I like to do that. You mentioned kids. I have kids over for pizza parties, and I make the dough in the morning. Yeah. And then we'll do little pizzas and let them pick their ingredients. And,
that's nice.
And do that. And I get my big green egg get it up to like 550 degrees. They cook like that. Yeah. And again, they're not healthy.
No. Like I said, I mean, it's something for us, though. It's something, there is actually still something holy about that. I remember, I forgot which Bible study I was teaching in the parish, and they were talking about the difference between eating and like dining, and that
Right.
what Jesus did with in the old time. They didn't really do like we do now culturally, where I've just got to eat something because I got somewhere else to go.
Right.
That it was an experience in and of itself.
Right. Yeah. Then I just realized the other thing I spent a lot of time doing, or I'd like to spend more time doing, is photography.
Really?
I got back to that. I used to do that. I used to work in a dark room and do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
In college, I did the entire yearbook myself once, and so, yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, it brings us extra ways to connect to the people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an integral part. And I think we've learned it in most of our episodes. If we're not making that effort to go to them, we're missing something in our priesthood to some
We have to
degree.
have some place to connect too.
Yeah.
If we're just doing churchy things, we're not going to connect with people because that aren't willing to try churchy things.
Exactly. I mean, it's still good to offer those, have an adoration nights or different things.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to get a good number. Hopefully you'll get some random person who wanders in, has never encountered it. But there's those times for myself, it's go to a football game for the high school that I'm in the parish boundaries. It's cooking for parishioners, or just wandering around the festival and making a pest of myself, visiting everybody and distracting
I've heard
everybody.
you're good at that.
I'm very good at being a pest.
That's what I've heard. Nobody's ever told me that, Scott.
I can only imagine. We won't ask what the nickname Bishop was going to put on your name tag today.
Nope.
We'll just stick with Pat.
There we go.
Now, one of the things also I've asked in every one of our episodes is, right now in our society, we don't really have that culture that promotes vocation to the religious life and priesthood. There's a great culture to become a lawyer, become a doctor, go to college for degrees. But what would you say is some things that we can advise both in our own parishes, but those who are viewing, to help in developing that culture of vocation more in our communities?
First, I think they have to see happy priests.
Mm-hmm.
They have to see priests as really human beings and not people stuck in a rectory that only say Mass on Sundays. So those things you just said. And I think we have to help our families to understand there's a great way of life. Mm-hmm. And that I've had more parents say, I don't want my kid to be a priest. You're overworked. I said, do I look unhappy? Do I look sad? Am I going around grumpy? I mean, I had an African priest with me for a while, and he was always smiling. So they called him the happy priest until they could get his name right. And so I said, all right, everybody, grumpy priest here.
Exactly. But I think it's very true what you're saying about that. Mm-hmm. With that culture of vocation, it's sparked by the idea that we're not being lessened as a human being to choose to be a priest.
Part of the sins of our past make it more difficult, because I can remember priests letting me be their driver, priests letting me do different things, mm-hmm. and just that time with a priest that we can't really do as easily anymore, because we have to have another person, we have to have other adults and things like that. But we got to think outside the box, like cooking. As often as I can, have this big area in the back where we can invite kids and do bonfires in the backyard and things mm-hmm. like that. So we just have to be more creative and let people know we're approachable and see how much fun that we have when we're not working.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I don't know if I've ever considered work a day yet.
Right, but I mean, but
yeah, I know
kids,
what you mean.
No kid wants to follow us to the hospital to anoint somebody
exactly.
or whatever else. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Though I do have to say, my pastor from home, most of the time in the seminary, if he knew I was in the area, mm-hmm. he would call my dad to ask him, hey, would you be willing to go do the visits to the homebound? So knowing my dad would push it back. So my home parish is Panna Maria, Texas.
Oh, wow, okay.
Immaculate Conception of the
last
Blessed
name,
Virgin.
doesn't it?
Yep. The oldest Polish community in the United States.
Yep.
We used to say North America, but apparently someplace beat us out by 6 months.
Oh, well.
So we'll stick with United States.
There we go.
But that was, he knew that my dad would bum it off on me. So in the end,
we moved too much. So even when I was in the seminary, my dad kept moving. So I never had a pastor that could,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Now we have to introduce our guest here also. So who is this?
That is Gabby. She is the parish dog. She's actually my dog, but they've told me if I ever get an assignment, I have to leave the dog.
Oh.
Come here, Gabby.
Come here.
Gabby, come here. So, come here. Come on. Yep. So this is Gab. This is who's been making the noise. And there are a few people that said I can move away somewhere, but she has to stay.
Okay. Is she a mixed breed, or what is Gabby?
She's a rescue, but she's a Schnauzer rescue. She was left on a pet store's door with papers and her sister.
Oh, wow.
So I got her to help with my old dog, and she has once she has separation anxiety from her early life, but other than that, she's a great little dog. And I go through the school and everybody's like, "Hi, Gabby, hi, Gabby, hi, Gabby," and nobody's like, "Human here,
no one
human
acknowledges
here."
the priest. I found that the pets actually helped me in the ministry.
Mm-hmm.
They provide an icebreaker that sometimes we don't always realize
We
we
have
need.
kids in the school on the spectrum, and I get them to talk to me in a way that never before like that. And I think even our bishop, who's not always a big dog fan, is starting to understand that the ministry we can do with animals is amazing.
There's something special about them. I mean, I have my dog. I have a Cocker Spaniel that they call a chocolate merle. So think of camouflage using chocolates, browns, and silvers with a little bit of white. And it's amazing the difference between me just walking around the parish and people seeing me, and when I have my dog Loki running around with me. That is an icebreaker. It's something, a way for them to connect to the human side to some degree.
Right.
Today, I do want to thank everyone for tuning in with us today. I look forward to having y'all come on and watch our next episode. And until next time, thank you for tuning in with us today.
Thank you so much for being a part of watching this vocation video series, and we're excited that you took time to do so. God has a call for each and every one of us, and maybe God is calling you to be a priest or a religious brother or sister. So don't be afraid. God's love is with you, and God will give you the strength to answer that call. If you'd like to speak with me or anyone in the vocation office, or you seek further information, go to our social media, San Antonio Vocations, or just simply look us up, Google us, and you'll find the information, and we'll get information to you as quickly as possible. God bless you, and God be with you.